0, 1. Let's get started.
Hi and welcome to Beyond the Barracks, the podcast where service ends but the story begins. And I've got Rachel Webster here today, a veteran, security consultant and mental health campaigner. Hi and welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's brilliant. We've sort of danced around each other on social medias and got common friends and never actually met. So it's kind of a first virtual meeting, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And like you say, mutual friends have aligned us and put us together. So I'm excited to share my story and support your podcast.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's great to finally, catch up, find out your story and share it as well. So if we jump straight in, what was your childhood like and what did you get up to at school and that type of thing?
Yeah. Oh, pre-social media, thank the Lord.
Yeah.
So I originally from a little town called Brigg in Lincolnshire. I had a great childhood, free of any form of Facebook and Instagram and all the other bits, and pretty much a bit of a tomboy, I guess. Did a lot with my dad, and when it came to a point in school about what I wanted to do, I had this vision of being like working on the oil rigs because that's what my dad used to do, and at this point, never ever realizing that my vision was restricted because I was a girl, and I remember a significant event at school where I'd opted to do engineering, and we had these series of projects that we had to do, and I lined up with the boys because it was like a toasting fork. In fact, I think my mum still got this toasting fork, and you obviously had to weld the fork to the handle. So I queued up with the lads, and Mr. Franks said, "You can't do that bit. Only boys can weld." And I was a little bit affronted at this remark, even at 15, and especially at that time, regardless of politics, you had Margaret Thatcher voicing her concerns and her words about women in the workplace, and not being restricted and being allowed to do anything. So for me, regardless of her being a politician, she was saying women can do anything. So I was like, hang on, why can't I weld? And he went, you just can't. And that really stuck with me. And then several weeks later, British Steel came round offering apprenticeships. And I put my hand up and I went, can girls apply? They went, yeah, I want to be a welder. And they said, just apply. And that was my journey. I went then to become one of the first female welders at British Steel since the Second World War. And I featured in all the papers and everything, and that was that. So yeah, sorry, that was my initial journey as pre-military.
But that's amazing, isn't it? Because obviously during the World War One and World War Two effort, all of the women stepped forward and did all of the male jobs like welding, driving, flying even, and then we then just took a step backwards. And then we weren't allowed in the job, which is incredible, isn't it?
I know. I remember my great grandma telling me about her stories working in the munitions factories and working the fields in Lincolnshire. So, like you say, amazing that after the war, it was sort of revert to type. The men took on the jobs and the women took home, went back to, been by the kitchen sink and not been allowed out again for a while. So, that really, that's the biggest sort of memory and what I think initially shaped me as an individual. Those words have resonated all the way through now my life, as in, when that school teacher said you can't do that, I just proved them wrong and I did it. So don't tell me I can't, because I can has been my sort of mantra.
Yeah. And then eventually, what decided you or made you go and join the WRAC?
I know, I mean, at that point I didn't even know the WRAC existed, but there was a few guys in my cohort on my apprenticeship that had gone off to join the army, and they'd come back saying, cheap cars and all this sort of stuff, and they'd been in Germany, and it was all this sort of like, I was like, oh, mesmerized, because at this point I'd never left, the perimeter of sort of Lincolnshire. And I went to the Army Careers Office after a 6 to 2 shift. There was me in my overalls and all sooted up face, and I walked into the Army Careers Office, and there was this big old colour sergeant sat there, and he looked up at me and went, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to join. I'd like to join the Royal Engineers." And at this point, he literally belly laughed and said, "Don't be stupid. You're a girl." Obviously, we're talking like 1988. 89. And I said, "Well, I've just finished my welding apprenticeship." He said, "Well, if you were a boy, we'd have you, but you're not." And he said, "Go in the back, I'll put a video on, and you can decide what you can do." And there was this video of either I think it was the R&P and the Ink Corps, and I said, "Can I join the military police then, please?" And yeah, that was that. Filled in the forms, and off I went then to Guildford, and that was a journey in itself, because I thought I didn't realise there was this separate training area before you then went to the military police training school at Chichester, as it was then. So that was an
Yeah.
experience in itself.
Yeah, so I didn't experience that, because I joined direct as a Royal Signals engineer, because they disbanded the WRAC by the time
1992, yeah.
by the time I joined. But obviously the remnants of that, and everybody I worked with, there was a lot, all our corporals and our sergeants, female wise, were all WRAC, and very proud of it. So
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
how was the training was very different from what I recall people telling me.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit daunting, because if you can imagine, for me, I'd had a little bit a different exposure to the workforce when I first left school. It was, I went into a structural workshop with like 250 guys, and there was me, 17, 18-year-old, just coming out of my, just joining, going into my apprenticeship, and therefore then, going into another environment, but predominantly it was all female. Well, Guildford was all female. All the instructors were female. All the squads were female. And yeah, it was a little bit different. Great friendships though made. I'm still friends with several of the girls that I was in my squad. Again, we're still talking pre-internet, pre-Facebook, pre-mobile phone era. And yeah, it was daunting. We was having, dare I say, we got maybe a little bit more, not, I don't know what word to use, because we were identified as military police then. We was classed as WRAC Prevost. So we weren't given the military police cap badge, obviously, until the 1992. So at Guildford, we still had the WRAC Berry, and then when we moved to Chichester and we passed out, we was classed as WRAC Prevost. We weren't classed as Royal Military Police. But during the training at Guildford, we were known as the girls that would be then going to Chichester, and therefore, sometimes we were probably identified, and yeah, maybe our treatment was slightly different. And we're going back in an era as well, if you can remember, back in 1989, when I joined the military, to be homosexual was illegal. To get pregnant, you would have to leave the military. So, we had lots of wonderful colleagues that I've worked alongside who were hiding their sexuality because of these constraints that was put against them, that if they did, dare I say, come out, they would have left their military service, and unfortunately some people were identified and thrown out, and rightly so, getting their justification and compensation now. So I think there was maybe a little bit of animosity towards us, hidden, and rightly so, because they would have seen us as the enemy, that in the real world, when we finished training, if we got told that somebody was gay, homosexual, that we would we would be investigating them, and then unfortunately they would then be discharged. So yeah, times were so different. But to check, lighten the note, I remember that we got paid the X Factor. We got paid less money. We got a hosiery allowance, for those that don't know what that
You
is.
still get that?
A tight allowance, which I think back then was £7. I think it was £7 for the month. But I mean, anyone now knows, like, a pair of tights cost you about a fiver, don't they?
Yeah.
So it didn't go very far, this hosiery allowance. And then what else was different back then? You think, oh gosh, there was something else I was just about to say, but yeah, there were so many different aspects to that training period. And then I think we all passed out, and then we went on to our different trades, which would be either the Royal Signals, the military police, and then and us off we went to Chichester, and by gosh, that was a whole new level of difference then. But arriving at Beyond the Barracks in Chichester.
Yeah, I can imagine. So the RMPs and the Royal and like the Royal Signals, they've always had females in it.
Yeah.
So I always say that by the time I got there, they were quite a forward-thinking corps. So how did you find phase 2, if you like, training when you got put with the men?
I don't know whether I'd be able to say some of the things that we got called. I'm sure
yeah, maybe not.
I'm sure you've had the same, but I always remember walking through the entry with the Jerusalem Barracks with like 6 of the colleagues that I'd passed out with in Guildford, and I was met by this fierce, sergeant, and it was like, you're looking at them. Don't you look at me? Who do you get? Anyway, it was just the most like shocking experience ever. But ultimately, it was, when you look back now, the memories, the smiles, it made us all, really, I think. I mean, I'm still in touch now with like who was my, say, sergeants and sergeant majors. They're all retired and they're pensioners now, but you can I can still resonate and feel the anger towards us when we arrived, but no, it was a very different experience. And then we passed out very proud, and then off I went to my first posting in Germany, and then a couple of years later WREC got disbanded, and we were allowed then the Royal Military Police cap badge, and we were then allowed to be armed, because before then you wasn't allowed to be overtly armed in Northern Ireland, even back in the day. So there was loads of things that happened in 1992 that meant that we had a little bit more of a sort of on par with our male colleagues. Because I also remember when I first passed out of Chichester, and you then had like your grading boards from Lance Corporal to Corporal, to go and be a corporal in the military police, you had to go first to WREC Guildford to be assessed that you were good enough and pass a corporal's course at Guildford, and then go do the RMP corporal's course. So you had to do 2 courses to get promoted, and the peer, your male counterparts just had to do the 1. So I think it just put everything into perspective, I think, and put us all on an even keel when it got disbanded.
Yeah,
but like you say, the Royal Signals were very much the same as the military police. We'd been embedded, so to speak, in the core history for a while at that point. Although we had a different cap badge, they were still used to very much working with us. So it wasn't like when, say, the Royal Artillery all of a sudden got females, and the guys would be ringing us up. Can you tell us what we need to do, and how? I've got a girl on duty tonight in the guard room, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say to her. It was like you had to have a training package, how to deal with a female coming into the unit. So no, good times though, eh?
Yeah, and it's a massive part of history. Like, you're involved in the changeover of 2 corps. So, and to see the progression's massive, isn't it? It's massive from from that era to just into the 2000s, and then now is even more so, because
Yeah.
every corps and regiment will accept women if they pass that grade, which is what it needed to be, isn't it?
But and also just the general, dare I say, the human right aspect of it all, you know, being allowed to be openly gay, being allowed to be a mum, a dad, you know, and stay serving. You know, I remember back in, I think it was might have been just around Bosnia time, you know, making you know, mum was a single mum, but and didn't want to deploy, and not, you know, but you will deploy, and not understanding the complexities. Well, I don't, you know, with the disjointed family unit, you know, and there's all that support there now, whereas there never was before. You're in the army, that comes first, just do it, and not understanding the sort of the welfare aspect of it all. And I think we've learned as we've gone along to be more accepting, even in my time in the military, and I'm sure you saw the same, you know, and more challenging. And I think now, you know, I think we all got used to it as we went along. You know, you would never ask your sergeant, why are we doing that? Because I'm telling you, you know. But now the thinking soldier is saying that, you know, why can we not do it like this? And you're learning to be more collaborative and go, yeah, that's a good idea, you know, instead of that dictatorship that we had to do. You know, like, you're going to sweep leaves, but it's windy outside, boss.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. You're sweeping the leaves. Okay, we'll sweep the leaves.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, it was like they wanted to just give us stuff to do just for the sake of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And it was, as you say, you know, 1990, well, the eve of 2000, people, some serving soldiers, until like Kelly Holmes brought it to the public domain. I mean, I was quite surprised that nobody really knew about it. It wasn't until 2000 that you could be gay in the army, and they they did. There was some terrible stories. I'm sure you're aware
Yeah,
of them, and especially being a red cap. Um, and to think that only was in 2000,
I know.
and yet it's 20 odd years on, but there was still prejudice for quite a few years, and it still
Yeah,
slowed your career down if you were from that, like, demographics and stuff. And the same with, you know, women having kids. I think there was a couple of girls in the signals, and it was only because the signals regiment I was in was more forward thinking, whoever was in command, that they didn't deploy her and did, you know, give
yeah.
it a house and things. So it's mad, isn't it, how it's progressed, and soldiers today wouldn't really realise that that was
No.
an issue, which is great that, you know, female soldiers and everything's accepted and moved on, because they lost amazing soldiers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember one of my friends who I was in the military police with, she got investigated and thrown out for being gay. And it's just, it was horrendous to be part of that and support her. You
Mm,
know, I knew, but I knew she was, you know, and then you have that question mark, well, I should really report this. Of course I'm not going to. She's my
yeah,
friend, you know, she'd confided in me. And to see her go through that investigation and be thrown out, you know, and you think you've lost a really, really great person here. And, you know, as I think, I'm sure a lot now have got the right compensation that they've got, but their life path has taken a total different journey to what they wanted. You know, some of them would have been amazing full career soldiers and done amazing things, but then they had to, like, you know, pack up and find another route. And it's very sad that that happened. And, you know, I think there's still probably prejudices out there in other, I think, not just in the military, I think in all sectors. And I saw that when I left the military. You know, there's still people out there, even to today I come across them, prejudiced against either you've been a female, you know, been assertive, and
yeah,
you know, I'm sure, you know, we've both experienced that. But I think with age, you learn to deal with it better. And, you know, I guess the Rachel of even 10 years ago would have fired from the hip and challenged and been, you know, that person to say, you're not speaking to me like that. Whereas now I try and do it in a more measured manner, or say, I don't really like the way you're
Yeah.
speaking to me. And I learned that actually from working with some very amazing 30-plus-year-olds in the bank. You know, I would then maybe say something to them when I first left the military. You know, the tone of my delivery might have been a bit dush, you know, let's get this done. And I'm like, hang on a minute, Rach, you know, could you please tone it down slightly? And it's not until you have that somebody explaining to you how you're coming across that you go, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to be like that. And then you learn to adjust your mannerisms around the environment you're in. And that's what I try and do now, is that if I am getting challenged by somebody and feel a bit uncomfortable, I try and do it in a manner similar to what that colleague said to me in Barclays, like, you know.
Yeah, and it's
We
hard to
sidetracked a little
get
bit
back.
there, haven't we?
Yeah, but it's hard to get out of that, isn't it? I get told off for
Yeah.
it all the time.
Same with eating really fast as well.
Yeah, just think
I've had that
you've got to go do
recently.
something.
That's a whole different ball game. It's like, you know, embedded in your DNA. You're like, right, food,
Yeah.
get it down. Go
So
out for dinner. Go
you
out
can
for
have half
dinner
an
and have a
hour kip.
social social dinner with your friends, and they're just like you've finished main course while they're just like finishing off the starter. No, I'm not that bad now, but you know, it's
Yeah,
embedded. Some habits are hard to break.
yeah, yeah. And they are, yeah. So you served for 24 years, and we could probably talk just on the RMP side for about an hour. But you did serve for 24 years, and you went to NI, Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghan. What
Iraq,
was
yeah.
what was for you the single most standout operation, or you know you fondest?
Oh, I just already brought goosebumps. Kosovo, without a doubt.
Yeah,
I was very privileged to be part of that deployment. You know, it was a long time. We were waiting in Macedonia, and when we finally crossed in the border, you know, this is where you see how operations can be done really, really well. And we had, you know, God rest his soul, Sir General Mike Jackson in charge of that deployment. And you know, when we went over that border, we all knew where we were going, what we were doing. You know, you know, for me, I went to a village called Obelich, and I was supporting the Green Howards Battle Group. I was the sort of policing presence for that community, but also supporting the guys when they went out on patrol, ensuring that everything was done in line with how it should be. And that wasn't me checking, that was like I was their auditor type thing. It was sort of a collaboration between us both. And it was, you know, if I had to go and do an arrest, I would have their mutual support. Similarly, if they were going out on patrol, I would be there to help and ensure that everything was done in line. And therefore, like, you know, as we see today, I don't think there's been any inquiries about what happened out in Kosovo. It was such a great initial deployment. I say everybody seemed to know what they were doing, when they were doing it, and where they were doing it. And you know, I had a great's the wrong word. The 3 months that I did have in Obelich was a mix of emotions. I worked alongside, like say, the Green Howards for that period of time, and would go out more or less on every patrol. Would make sure that, you know, I was dealing with the local community as best as I possibly could. You know, I think the first day I was there, I had this line of people all the way around the block, basically wanting to report anything from, you know, mass grave to, you know, theft of their livestock. You know, houses been set on fire. I think whilst I was there in that period of time, I had a report of over 450 house fires, multiple mass graves discovered, you know, rapes, atrocities carried out by the Serbians. I was very, very privileged to meet some young girls that had been raped, and between myself and the KLA commander, I was able to explain to these girls about what evidence meant, and that putting statements together would help me find the people responsible. And we did, and they was arrested, and I then handed everything over to the International Police Force. So that was probably the most defining moment in my career, in terms of what I managed to achieve in a short period of time on that deployment. And I think it took a toll on me when I did return. I think the way the military police was very similar to the Royal Signals. 2 years deployment, boom, you moved, you posted. Whereas I think with like, for example, an infantry unit, they go back, they debrief, whether that be a few beers, getting round and having a chat, whatever it might be. They have their own coping mechanisms of dealing with it. And I finished my deployment there in Germany, in Osnabrück. Although we were in Kosovo, I goes back to Osnabrück. My posting order had come in. Boom, I'm off to Northern Ireland. So now I'm picked up and dropped into Northern Ireland. And again, like with the Corps, you will know a few key people, and there was a couple of guys there that I'd worked with previously, and therefore I had that ear, but nobody had been to Kosovo. So, when you're trying to explain, I think I had the smell of, I would say, that smell of death in my nose for months afterwards. At some point, something would trigger it and I would be back in Obelich, near one of the mass graves that we'd discovered or something. And I think what would be seen as the first time need to have counselling. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. I hid it at the time. I ran up the Samaritans a couple of times whilst I was there in Northern Ireland. And then I didn't want to go down and see what would be classed as a psychiatric nurse then in the camp, because you then thought it would mark your career. So you just hid it, and you sort of hid it either in a drinking or talking to, or both, or talking to, people who would listen to you. And there was a long time when I talked about my experiences in Kosovo particularly, that I would cry. And now, I look back and fond memories of the experiences that I had there. And, I look at the great things that, by being able to know that there was an apartment block, for example, empty because the Serbians who had done bad things had gone out, had left, and there was a lady there with her family living in a UN type tent, and been, inviting me into a tent and sweeping the crumbs up, on the 10th floor, allowing us to sit down and giving us a bread, nothing at all. And that's what I found on that deployment and subsequent deployments. These communities have nothing, but they will give you everything,
Yeah.
and I was able to, move her into one of these empty apartments, and, she would then come every morning, make bread for us, because we were self-sufficient in this sort of what was an old police station. So we used to make our own food and things, which was another story altogether. But, that little act of kindness, I often think of her and I think, I wonder what happened to her. I'd love to go back. And I remember a really significant thing in the village, because obviously I'm from Lincolnshire, so I learned to drive a tractor when I was younger. And one of the great things that we'd managed to do with some money that we'd been allocated was to get a tractor and trailer to help collect up the rubbish, around the village, because during the war phase, obviously nothing had been sorted out, and there was multiple, rubbish piles of stuff everywhere, and it was beginning to smell and things. So we managed to source this tractor and trailer out, and our little location, there was a railway track that went through Obelich, and we got this local who'd come running in. I was so proud of this tractor and trailer. It had been stored in this area near the train station. When I say train station, it wasn't really a train station. It was like a line that ran through it. And there was like, used to call me Sheriff Rachel. I was Sheriff Rachel. Sheriff Rachel, tractor's been, stolen. And we're like, me and one of the Green Howards, we looked to one another. It's like, right, come on then. We ran off down the road. Anyway, this tractor was pulling right away and was like, there's no way we're going to catch that on foot. And then this little Trabant car came zooming by, and we were like, "Stop! Can you help us? We need to." Like we was crying. We need to follow that tractor. So that everybody got out the Trabant, and if you know one of them, like they can push in about 6 people. So all these people got out apart from the driver, and we gave chase to this tractor, and he got really involved in this tractor. Me and the green-haired lad were laughing, and he's laughing in the back because it just seemed farcical. We managed to parallel the tractor, do a U-E in front of it, and then we jumped out and said, "Stop!" Anyway, we get them. There's loads of guys in the back. He deals with them, gets arrested, and then he looks at me. He's like, "Well, how are we going to get the tractor back?" And I went, "I can drive." And so I drove the tractor back through the village. Everyone's applauding me like I'm some superhero. But it was just those moments where you think, oh God, in all the despair, there's these little light moments of that just bring you back to reality. And yeah, I was lucky enough to feature in I think it was the Times when they came, because obviously because of the severity of that case that I dealt with, it drew the attention of some of the reporters, because at that time there was a lot of questions about what had happened to some of the girls in the villages during the war phase. So yeah, it was a very poignant moment in my career, and I think that helped shape me going forward after I'd recovered from when I got posted to Northern Ireland. I sort of then started to find myself and go, right, it's now a full-time career for me now, Rach. And it swapped from being a job to being a vocation, and that's when I then decided I was in for the long haul, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that is with ops, how you've summed it up, because a lot of people just see the guns and the bullets or troops marching, and operations like Kosovo, Bosnia and stuff, a lot of it was interacting with the locals, and that's where, if you like, hearts and minds are one.
Yeah.
And we did our real work, but that's the untold stories really of Bosnia, Kosovo, everywhere else they've been, Afghan and stuff, and they're, when you get over the trauma, they're the bits that you can laugh at and know that you've changed people's lives for the better, even after all of that absolute, well, you can't even imagine the devastation that war brings unless you've been there, can you?
No.
Yeah, so you had a career that went all the way up to the dark side of officer.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I'm a bit unique with that one though as well, because obviously, like after Iraq in 2003, I'd just come back and I was like, you know what, I just want to do something different. And I remember going into the chief clerk's office and saying, right, I'm done with RMP. I'd like to, still stay in. What can I transfer into? And he went, come and join the SBS, the staff personnel support. And I looked at him and went, no, not a chance. And actually I did. And you know what? It was probably the best thing that I could have done. And I transferred as a sergeant, although in theory I should have, if I'd have stopped in, hopefully I would have got me staff sergeant, etc. But I transferred as a sergeant, and I sort of career found myself for a bit. But what happened? I ended up at the Royal Engineers. So it was full circle. And I think he's a General Lurch. I don't think he's in anymore, but Colonel Lurch was the CO at the time, and he wrote me up as his number 1 sergeant. Because I helped, because within the military police, we did all the courses. So I was on that Sandhurst journey to go to be an instructor, and then Iraq happened in the 2003, and so off I went to there instead of going on the Sandhurst cadre. So I'd done the military, I'd done all the courses, the skill at arms, the LFTT, the drill, which I hated. So I was like a little sort of training NCO, really, senior NCO. So when I went to the Royal Engineers, I was obviously the chief clerk for one of the squadrons, but I was also able to help out do training. And because with the Royal Engineers, they mainly focus on their career courses. So sometimes there was an instructor missing here and there. So I would fill in and do as much as I could. And it was down to really his leadership, Colonel Lurch's leadership, and that of his management team, that really showed me that I could do something different. Whereas I think sometimes in the military, when you're with your own group, you don't really see yourself. You're always comparing yourself. Are you good enough? No. Or people not liking you, or you've already upset people along the way, or for whatever reason, personality clashes. And it was like a fresh start for me. And people just saw me for who I was and say, right, you've got something that I think we can nurture, develop. And you know, I'd never written an essay since leaving school. You know, and Colonel Lurch gave one of the adjutant at the time and said, I want you to help get Rachel ready, or not Rachel, get Rachel Webster ready for a 3-day event for the commissioning for the SBS. So everybody doubted me. There's no way she's going to get that as a sergeant. And I came pretty much top of that board on that 3-day event. So I didn't know anything about whether I'd done it or not. We just like, I went off, did the 3-day event. Most of the people on there was obviously RSMs or Sergeant Majors, and then there was me. And I was successful. I prepped a lot. I'd worked hard for it. I didn't take anything for granted. Kept my fitness, the whole thing. I worked really, really hard. And but for 8 weeks, I was wondering what would happen. Would I get it? Wouldn't I get it? And I remember I got the sort of message from the Sergeant Major who's saying, right, you've got to be outside the commanding officer's door at 10:30. You're going to get your results of the commission. And I was like, right, okay. And he went, but you can do PT first. I was like, oh, for God's sake. It was, I think it was Friday, battle PT or something. Anyway, I noticed that there was a lot more people on this PT than normal. So I'm like going up. I don't know whether you're familiar with Tidworth or anything, but there's oh God, there's some goddamn hills there, aren't they? So
But
I
a
was running
flat
up
place,
this.
it's quite,
Yeah, I was running up this hill, and the Sergeant Major, who's no longer with us, God rest his soul, he said, whatever, got around this corner, and the whole of the squadron was lined up. In fact, I think there was 2 squadrons lined up. And the Sergeant Major whispered to me, he says, and I'm all sweaty and muddy and everything because I'd been chuntering along because they'd been making me do press-ups along the way. And he went, whatever you do, don't cry. And then he got to the front, and then the CO came out and he said, we would like to congratulate Sat Webster on her commission. And I was like blown away. They had all this mesh silver there and bottle of champagne. And then they made me run back. I was expecting to get a lift in the Land Rover. But it was times like that, and you saw the difference in approach of leadership and management, you know. And and I got a commission, and I ended up going to 4 Army Air Corps as the deck commander. And then I deployed out to Afghan in the 2007 with them. That was different again from a G1 perspective as a staff officer and everything. And then my proudest moment, I think, was I always said that I would like to be a regimental admin officer for an infantry unit, and I did that as an REO. I knew it would be hard, REO with 1 rifles, because I think from your time as a section sergeant, knowing the importance of that G1 type of stuff, the admin, making sure everything's in line, next to kin details, insurance, the whole shebang, knowing that I had a really strong team with me that we would deploy out to Afghanistan with them, and if anything, and it did, inevitable happened, that we were, everything was in line and we were prepared to deal with the after effects of whatever that might look like. And then I left the military from there.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because people sort of downplay the admin side of things, but without that side and with your understanding from a greater detail, it must have helped people. Probably it's like a silent, it's a bit like the cookhouse, isn't it? No one ever thanks the chef, but without them we wouldn't get out the door, you know.
And I think sometimes you butt heads with the operation side of things in the unit, because you're like, no, we need to be doing ops, and you're like, well, yeah, but you need to give my team time to get their G1 stuff sorted out, because that's equally important, you know. And you know, from a last letter to you know, making sure that everything was covered from insurance, the whole shebang. And you know, and having that hard message, standing up there, you know, I remember standing in the church before we deployed. There's a whole regiment, you know, over 1,000 odd people, and standing there and saying, some of you in this audience will not come back. You know, you have got to make sure that your administration, from your will to your finances, are sorted before you put boots on ground. And the sad thing was when we had, as it was classed, battlefield replacements whilst we were out there. Obviously, you know, you get these young lads coming in from other units, and there's a very significant thing that not thing, that's the wrong word. There was I recall, sorry, this young lad arriving, and he was going straight out onto a search op, and we'd already had some fatalities up to that point. And I said to him, look, have you got insurance sorted? Have you got your pack sorted? I don't know, ma'am, I don't know. I said, right, okay. And I used to go down to Little Heathrow in Camp Bastion before any big search op, because most of the soldiers, the riflemen at that point, would get sent into Little Heathrow before then going out onto a mission, so to speak, whether that be a day or 2 days. And I used to go down there and sort out, you know, take any sort of mail that had come in. You know, because we were part of 3 Commando Brigade, we had great resources, financial resources to support like welfare. So I would, you know, bundle up about 40 pizzas from the American pizza up place, and take down soda and pizzas so that they could sit there and have some pizza before deploying. It's not the best thing you can think of, but it was a little bit of morale. And when you've not had anything like that, or a cold soda for weeks on end, that is amazing morale. And we'd sit there and you know, give them the letters, and then take any letters that they had, just to make sure that, you know, whatever, if something did happen, we had everything. And this young lad was there, and I still smoked at the time. And I remember emptying my cigarettes out of this packet, because bad officer admin, I didn't have a notebook with me. And I got him to go, you know, Trooper X, I give Captain Webster authority to maximise my packs to I think it was 15, was it 15 or 20? It was 15 units, wasn't it? 15 units, his signature date. Kept that, got back to my G1 cell, and one of my team filled out the form. And obviously, because there's a delay, because you haven't got instant access to the PAX machine, but you've got it in, you have to fill out the form and everything. It was there, it was authorised, it was done. 24 hours later, he lost both his feet. You know, and if we'd not done that, that's the difference between 25 and 250, you know, thousand. You know, and it was that, and it wasn't just me, it was my whole team had that mindset. So we just wanted to make sure that, you know, if the worst did happen, we were all lined up, and we had everything in place for them, you know. And you know, it's little things like that just stick with me, really.
Yeah, and that was invaluable, because in my Bosnia, Kosovo, East Timor, Northern Ireland, we never had any of that.
No.
I remember waiting to go into East Timor day one, D1+1, I think it was, and writing on a bluey my own will. And not because I've been told, just because I thought it's pretty, you know, it was pretty gnarly out there the first time, you know, getting shot out, blown up, all that proper, like Vietnam. And we didn't have any of that support. And that's where, you know, the military has evolved, hasn't it? Because it started to look after it. I know we all complain about it, but it started to look after its soldiers a bit.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, like that reminds me when you were saying about the last letters, you know, asking the guys to write last letters, having photographs taken, you know, them knowing actually you're lining up, oh yeah, this, you know, do I look all right? Will I look all right in the papers if I, you know, it was just that, again, with that squaddy banter into it. But, you know, having those last letters and their particular photograph in a file back in the UK. So, you know, so in the event of something happened, my rear party team, were able to then deal with what they needed to do. And, you know, you needed that. You needed that administration time before we deployed to do it, and equally making sure that everybody who came thereafter was treated exactly the same from a replacement perspective. But yeah, it was an interesting time, and equally, you know, I hung up the boot in the 2013 after 24 years service and decided, you know, switching for high heels and a handbag in Canary Wharf.
Yeah. How did you transition? How did that go?
Well, you know what? I consider that. I think also as a, I suppose as a female, we're good at talking, aren't we? Well,
Yeah.
and comes with that a bit is like what is that word? It's networking, isn't it? And I remember doing a charity funding with the soldiers charity for with the rifles in Canary Wharf. Um, Probably about a year before I was due to leave. And I remember seeing all this buzz, this energy, and these girls, you know, wearing these lovely dresses, handbags, and looking immaculate, and going about their day-to-day business. And I was like, wow, I'd love to work here because just the energy of the place. And I then went to an Insight Day in Barclays. So we're talking 2013, which was pretty much, I think, the start of all these sort of military type Insight days. I think KPMG had been doing them, a few of the banks, but Barclays seemed to be where everybody was going to and gravitating towards. And I think a lot of that was down to the work of what was then retired Stuart Tootle, Colonel from the Paras. He was the head of physical security at Barclays at the time, and he put together what was the after program. I think it's been rebranded, but it's still going live now. And that had been running in the 2012, just pretty much off people's desks, you know, a bit of goodwill. And his main idea was to help injured soldiers initially. It wasn't like to do like, you know, a 6 or a 12-week work placement. It was initially to give soldiers who had maybe had life-changing injuries an opportunity to come into the bank during their sort of rehabilitation phase, and to learn to maybe be a project manager or whatever it might be, but to give them an exposure of what it was like in the corporate world. I was just blown away by it. I remember going on the Insight Day and just meeting all these people that had been part of this program and thinking, you know what, I really would like to be part of this. And then I met this really lovely lady who is still a great friend now, Tessa Oversby, who said we need somebody to help support the after program to sort of get it bigger and a better audience. So I did that for 12 months, and then I was then offered a job as a business manager, but I still had a touch point in the military veterans program. But equally, Barclays, which not many banks sing their praises too much about what they do in terms of like their local footprint, you know, helping deliver presentations and CV workshops. I remember going to a CV workshop at Holloway Prison. You know, I then ended up mentoring a female offender and vouching for her on her first 3 months of work, you know, when she left prison. And, you know, things like that, I never thought I'd be able to still do when I was in Barclays. I think because with the military, I think we all have that purpose. We know what our purpose is. And I think when we leave the military, I've heard a lot of veterans say this, you lose your purpose, you lose that identity. And when I got part of that organisation, that purpose was still there. I was still able to add and influence certain aspects of what makes me feel good. There was values that we are embedded in us as military people, and Barclays had that. You know, cut aside the banking and all the finance side of stuff, the actual stuff that was being done by HR was amazing. You know, helping in hospitals, helping homeless shelters. You know, you could book a day off and go and make sandwiches at one of the local churches for homeless people. You know, like I said, I helped a young offender who was coming out of prison, you know, and I'm still in touch with her. She's doing incredibly well, got a child, she lives up in Liverpool. You know, things like that was great. And then and then I suppose we've got a bit of a black cloud to talk about, but I'll come there in a minute. That, you know, around then, about 43, 44, didn't even realise it. You know, you're at that perimenopausal stage, aren't you? And that's when things started changing slightly. And then fast forward, I then become a menopause coach in order to help other women in Barclays and now beyond. I still, you know, I'm a moderator on a Facebook group, and I help women try to identify what their struggles are and how to get themselves back in the room.
Yeah, and of that kind of age, I can relate, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, and women just do not realise it. We know about the menopause words, and then the next thing, you're running along at 40 and think life is great, because 40s are pretty all right.
Pretty good year, yeah.
And then, like, this baseball bat comes and hits you across the head with whatever symptom you have, and you're like, wow, why am I now not able to be as sharp as I was, or do this or do that, and why am I like walking upstairs more often and not knowing why I'm here? And
why am I putting laundry detergent in the fridge?
Or putting loads of weight on, and I'm still doing the same fitness. And men get it easy, and that's my opinion, basically.
Yeah. So I suppose now is a good segue to talk about the black cloud. I mean, or the black dog, or whatever you want to talk about. How you want to frame it. I suppose I try, as you've probably seen, I try and keep a very positive mindset these days. But I think there was a period in my life between 2016 or 2015 to 2016, 17 where I wasn't in a great place. And a lot of that was down to I'd been out of the military for 6 months, and I don't really talk about this anymore, but I'm thinking I think I need to, in order a wider platform to understand how you can recover from things, and how, you know, you can shape your future. And, you know, it's that word that we all use, that resilience gets us through. I was super happy 2013, 6 months into my new job, loving life in Barclays. And I'd had a message. I had a call from somebody from what was classed as IAT. I had no idea. I'd seen bits of it in the news, but at this point, I'd kept away from that. I was focusing on a career. I was busy training and and, you know. In Barclays, you finish work, you'll go have a little social drink, and by the time you got home, you went to bed and up again the next day. And I got a call saying that I'm such and such. Let's call him Burnside from the bill. You know, the bad character in the bill. Let's call him Burnside. I had a call from Burnside, and he said, "It's such and such, you know, we need to talk to you regarding your ex-partner in Iraq." And I went, I have no idea what you're talking about. And equally, if I've got nothing of an evidential nature to talk about involving him anyway. So, you know, what do you want me to say? He said, well, we can force you. And I went, well, if you want to force me, then let's go via solicitors, shall we? Because I don't know what you're talking about, and I have got nothing to say about him or what you're asking me for. And that was in the October. It unsettled me a little bit. I flagged it to certain people in the who were still serving in the military at the time, and they said, "Look, that's not right. They shouldn't have contacted you like that. Let me see what I can do." And now, fast forward another few months. It's cold, dark. I'm about to go for a run, debating on it. The wind is whirling around in Canary Wharf, and I get this whack on the door, and I'm like, what the hell is that? So I ran, like, who is it? And I saw this shadow of somebody by the door, and they went Navy police. And I thought, oh my God. And at this point I thought one of the riflemen or somebody had got me down as their sort of executor of their will, and something had happened. So I ran down the stairs in my dressing gown and opened the door. Boom, I get like 6 men enter my house. Burnside is at the back in like a trench coat, saying, we're here to arrest you for misconduct in public office. And I'm like, what on earth is going on? And you can imagine, I won't go into details now, it's too long and it's too deep, you know, but it was flash to bang. In essence, then I ended up being handcuffed, being put in the back of a van. I'd not done my ablutions, not brushed my teeth, not had any water or anything. Get in this van. I'd asked, where am I going? You'll find out when I get there. I asked, where's a warrant? We don't need one. I asked for a Met policeman to be there. You're not getting one. You know, my basic human rights, what I knew, had just been totally violated. I'm like, now I just had a confusion, duress. You know, we all understand what that feels like. You know, courses in the military teach you, you know, you're going to get this and this is what's going to happen. It's going to be confusion. It's going to make you feel paranoid. It's all the things that I'd undergone on some form of training previously. And I'm sat in this van and I'm like, seeing the signs going out of London, and I'm like, where are they taking me? And I asked to go to the toilet, refused. I asked for water, it was refused, you know, which will all become relevant in a minute. And then 2.5 hours, nearly 3 hours later, I end up at the gates of a Portsmouth Navy custody cell. And I remember coming out, and there was this huge custody sergeant major. He had no, you know, I later found out had been told and forced to process me because there was no paperwork. And I came out and he said, look, you know, I don't know what's gone on, what this is, but let me tell you, be treated fairly here. And I'm like still in this like confused panic. I remember going into this custody holding cell, and bear in mind, in the military police, I'd been used to going in to get a soldier, not being in one, and especially as a civilian. And I'm like, all these men now, and Burnside's still there at the back. He said, get her in one of the cells. And I remember looking at all these young lads and saying, I'm not going anywhere. I'm standing firm. And if you touch me now, you know, this is all illegal. And the sergeant major just cleared the whole custody cell and he said, do you smoke? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, look, I'll get you in the exercise yard. We'll try and keep you out of that cell as much as possible. And 14 hours later, they released me. I had no money, no nothing to get back to London. And it was just like, during the process, obviously, I'd been interviewed, no comment. It was all a ruse to, again, speak about my ex-partner. And it took 2 years for them to admit unlawful arrest and detention. And at that point, during that period, I think we spoke briefly about it offline. You know, I put on weight. I had a disconnect with sleeping. I was drinking heavily. I was involved in, very toxic relationships. I lost some dear friends through my behaviours. And I wasn't, now I'm accountable for my actions. At that time, I wasn't accountable. And luckily with Barclays, I was able to get some real good therapy. But it wasn't until it came into the papers, really, that I was able then to express to people how I would been treated, because I kept it quiet. Because the first thing you say to somebody is, I was arrested. They were like, well, what did you do? And I'm like, I didn't do anything. So the story hit the papers. I was on News at 10. I was on the sofa with Piers Morgan and stuff, and it wasn't about, hey, woe is me. This was about me putting my head above the parapet, because there was this significant increase in people, veterans committing suicide. There was a significant increase with the noise of what this IAT inquiry was doing. And I, to this day, believe that there is a link between somebody being given either not a hard knock like I was only one of another that was subjected to similar treatment, but they got letters, and it probably evoked a lot of feelings and emotions that they'd probably put to bed, coupled with that, maybe their relationship going down and whatever else it is. But I was like, I am adamant that this is not right and it needs to be shut down. And going back to the values, of me, that's my DNA. I was like, I am not going to let this beat me or define who I am. This was wrong. No one should come into your house in the UK and take you away and lock you up without due process and due diligence. And I totally get the fact that it was stuff that went on in Iraq that shouldn't have done. But you don't knock, an orchard of the finest fruit to get a few bad apples. And that's what they did to me. And I looked at this picture that's widely available on the internet, and I use that now. I used to use that in Barclays about mental health, and how things can change with a positive mindset. And there was a picture of me, and I didn't even recognize myself. My face is bloated, dark eyes, You know, I was on Xanax, I was smoking, I was drinking heavily, wasn't sleeping. I was probably 2 to 3 hours a night, coupled with menopause.
Mm.
Whoa, I mean, how on earth I
Yeah.
wasn't, you know, something else could have happened. I have no idea, but that in itself was just this explosion. And now when I started studying the menopause, when you have a PTSD event or an emotional event that happens, it can then exasperate your symptoms. Rightly so, you know, your cortisol levels are through the roof. So it took a lot for me. Once I saw that photo and I didn't recognize who I was, I then was like, right, I need to make a change because I'm going to kill myself, literally. Either if it's not through mentally, you know, what I was doing, I just was just on this verge of total, like, you know, chronic fatigue and failure. I remember seeing an advert for a boot camp in Blackheath near where I was living. I was like, right, I'm going to ring them. And I remember this young lad coming round, and he went, now he saw, like, you know, what I looked like, and I told him briefly the story, and he said, well, we'll get this sorted. And I remember screwing the cigarettes up, taking the wine and pouring it away, you know, because I was getting to a point of drinking wine at 11 o'clock, you know, and that was my sort of catalyst of change. And then I adopted a dog called Boris, and he had anxiety issues similar to me, and between us we fixed each other. and that's, yeah, that's the end really of it all, and the beginning then of my journey into wellness, and still trying to help others, and trying to be positive and keeping away from toxicity, and calling it out. You know, if it's wrong and it feels wrong, then it is wrong, and I'm going to tell you it's wrong.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful, and how, you know, you'd left the military behind. You know, you tottering around in high heels and handbags and living in the high life in Canary Wharf, and then the next thing you dragged back to something that you probably put a lot of soldiers in. But no wonder it triggered
Yeah,
like everything, and it took you on that downward spiral, because it was totally, it's probably like a scene from, you know, a
yeah,
movie that you'd expect,
yeah, yeah.
because you
No,
think
no,
I've done nothing wrong.
I know,
Why am I
and
here?
what. And when I went through the therapy piece, it was identified that I suffered from what's classed as betrayal trauma. And, you know, because I'd given my whole career, 24 years service, you know, I'd forfeited having children,
Mm.
particularly at that period in time. As you know, you would have, maybe it wouldn't have allowed me to carry on and do the things that I did at that time, because
Yeah.
there wasn't the policies or processes in place to that if I wasn't with my partner. And same with relationships, the whole thing. I'd given everything I had, and I tried to be the best as well. You know, I maybe didn't always get it right, or maybe, you know, failed sometimes in my leadership, but my heart was always the soldiers, the riflemen, the job I was doing, whether it be deployed in you know, Kosovo, Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan, and way back in the day of Northern Ireland. So I'd always tried to make a difference, and then to be hit the way I was, you know, it really took its toll, because thankfully I had a great supportive boss who, you know, Tessa, I remember ringing her up while I was in the cell, and she said, look, I mean, I was worried, because I was worried, I think it was going to be my first chair, I was running my first ever co-meeting, and I'm like, Tessa, I won't be able to do it. And she went, gosh. And then the next day I turned up to work, you know, I put the makeup on, turned up to work, and it was denial, because I had no one else to lean to pay the mortgage or whatever else, and the rent. It was just me, and I was scared that if I didn't turn into work, because I was only on a secondment, I wouldn't be considered for employment. So a lot of it I pushed back, and then I had the mask of taking the Xanax, taking, you know, self-medicating with alcohol to go to sleep, not going to bed, not sleeping in my bedroom, sleeping on the sofa because I didn't want to go to the bedroom because I feared that I was going to get woken up in the middle of the night. And it wasn't until I was sitting with a guy who I ended up working with on a project who suffered with ADHD. And he said to me, and he was really honest and open about his issues that he had. And he said, Rachel, are you okay? And I remember just crying. I went, no. And he went, tell me, talk to me. And he said, you should go get some counselling, Rachel, because if you don't, you're going to make yourself ill. And that was the best thing ever. Barclay's been with private healthcare. I was very, very lucky to be part of that. And I had the best therapist. And, you know, I went to see them for nearly a year and a half. And that helped because at the same time, when it launched in the papers and the story was captured, I started working with Johnny Mercer and making him aware of my issues, because I'd started seeing on LinkedIn and in the newspapers about Aya, and I'm like, hang on a minute, my story is bad. You know, these were guys who, you know, I'm not saying mine was worse than somebody else's, but these were guys who were getting like, you know, a letter or whatever. And I'm like, Johnny, this is what happened to me. And then he used some of my case to put forward to Sir Michael Fallon, as he was at the time, and talk and, you know, and get the IAT closed down to a degree, because of how many like me had been treated. But at the same time, then I started then going, right, focus on you now, Rachel, not just about the menopause, the arrest and everything else. You need to start looking after you, because otherwise, you know, who knows what could have happened. And that's what I did. And, you know, me and Boris went on this little journey of long walks and me healthy eating and you know, getting back to being positive again. And that's what I try and live my life by now.
And it's always, I've found when I speak to different people on my own journey, it's always a combination of, it's not just one thing that gets you out of the hole. It's, you know, I mean, dogs are amazing. They're, you know, animal therapy and assistance dogs are incredible. And then they obviously get you outside because you have to walk all the time, whether you like it or not. Which brings in the nature and then the exercise. What was your biggest crutch, if you like, that you always go to you know, you're feeling a bit stressed? I'm gonna go for a run, or
Yeah, that's it now. I mean, I'm a lot slower than I was, and I've done some amazing, crazy fundraising for, like, similar to yourself with Soldiers Charity and the Chelsea Hospital and stuff like that. Now it is the run. The run shuts any noise down, and the run helps me. I have my best ideas when I'm running now, and I, you know, put some music on or put a podcast on, and listen away and just do a run, and that's my happy place. I've noticed as well that, you know, if I do surround myself, and unfortunately we're in a business where you can't always pick and choose who you work with, and I have noticed that I now become very much more aware of other people's energy towards me, and if it is toxic or it feels uncomfortable, I can feel myself, you know, reaching for something bad, like, you're not bad, reaching for a Mars bar or another one, or I maybe eat three, and I'm like, why have I done that? And it feels, I just get anxious now around people that either don't like me or just don't, and you know, even though you try, they're just not very nice people, and it makes me very anxious, and I have to then either just step away from it or find some other way of dealing with it and flag it if I'm working with somebody. But yeah, I do still struggle sometimes with how to cope with that. I am getting better. You know, I used to probably go, yeah, what's your problem, like 10, 15 years ago. Now I'm sort of saying, look, I'm picking up on a certain vibe here. Have I done something wrong? You know, is there something I can do? Is there something that I'm doing is causing you to behave like this towards me? And they don't even like that. I think some people are just in their DNA. They don't like you. They don't like you. You know, I think we've all come across that middle-aged person of a certain, you know, stance, where he's from, what background, that just don't like women, simple as. And there's not a lot you can do about it,
no.
apart from smile, nod, and let them crack on. It's
Yeah,
their problem, not mine.
yeah, and we both work in a similar environment, which is quite male dominated. So we probably we do have to deal with that. I guess, as you were saying, with mental health and daily struggles, you're never fully over it, but you just have to learn to cope with it or
Yeah.
live with it, and live your best life as much as you can once you've dealt with as much as you
Yeah.
can the demons, I guess.
It's funny, really. I've recently come back from a deployment overseas, and people were saying, "Why are you going there?" And I'm like, I want to challenge myself. I want to still see if I can do it." And do you know what I really enjoyed about that was the routine. It shut down any noise. Getting up at a certain time, going for a run at a certain time. No, no requirement to cook, clean. Your laundry was done.
Yeah.
It was like, and it allowed me to. It was like, I suppose, an extreme boot camp. It just allowed me to reset and refocus. The job was still very intense, but the apart from that window when you were working, everything else was so regimental. And that's why I think also, reverting back to what we were chatting about earlier, why some military people do struggle so much when they leave, because it's like that routine, isn't it? Everything is done for us, and you've got your circle of friends, you've got your accommodation, you've got your washing that you have to do. Pretty much, your feeding is sorted. If you want to go to cookhouse, it's done. You've got your program,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, boom, out you go into the world, and you're like, ugh. And I think we are creatures of habit. And that 4 weeks of deployment that I've just had, literally, I've come back buzzing from that. Not because maybe about the work piece, but and I did enjoy that. But just that sort of routine of being able to do that every day without having to think about any worries about life admin.
Yeah, I find if I get into a routine and then it's disturbed by, it could just be someone knocks at the door or wants to come and see me,
Yeah.
and it's just like, well, I haven't been, not that I've run much because my knees are a bit screwed, but I haven't been to the gym today, or I haven't done this, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I get really anxious.
Causes that anxiety, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
hang on, this is out of my list. Like, I've got a list
Yeah,
literally
I've
here
always got
today.
lists.
I've got a list here. And it is. I don't think we ever lose it, or it's been slowly indoctrinated into us, or
Yeah.
maybe that's why we are drawn to the military in the first place. Who
Yeah.
knows? I'm sure somebody has done some psychiatric evaluation on that, and the reasons why people do join. But yeah, I think it is important now that I always have that time to do me, whether it's that run is my sort of savior. It just shuts the noise down, because sometimes, and I think I'm out the end of the menopause now. I'm 56, and but you still got that. Sometimes I feel like it's like a washing machine going on in my head, and you need to keep it still, and having that run just allows that extra to just calm and put it on off spin cycle, and I've got a period of time where I can just focus. So yeah, that's my go-to, and obviously your friends as well. I think having a small circle of dear friends that I can lean on and talk to is vital as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm assuming little Boris has passed over the Rainbow Bridge.
Oh gosh, no,
Right?
Boris is. I heard Boris is there. I have an amazing guy called Tristan. I've got another dog actually now called
Oh,
Toby.
brilliant.
So Boris is 8, or coming
Oh,
on
he's got
9.
years left.
It's got years left. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had Hamish before that. So when I was in the military, it's funny in the 2003, when I left the military police, I was like, right, I'm going to get a dog. So when I went to the Royal Engineers, I remember when I transferred to the SBS, I was like, right, I remember ringing up the regiments and saying, "Do they let you bring your dog into work?" "Yeah, okay, I'm going there then." And I had a little Hamish, and Hamish
You're
was
a
in my life.
typical officer with a dog, were
I
you?
wasn't. I wasn't an officer then. I was a sergeant.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, and
Yeah.
Hamish stayed on deployment with me until 2013, till I went to Barclays, and my mum, and then he went into retirement with my mum and dad, because he'd been used to me, been with me all the time. And I remember, like, sometimes he had a little accident. Once in the commanding officer's office in One Rifles, and be like, "Cat, Rachel, get your bloody dog, come and pick your bloody dog's poo up," or whatever he'd done. Anyway, so yeah, Hamish was with me, and then when he passed away, he did take it was sad, but he had an amazing life. And then, like you say, when all this stuff was going on, I remember the joy that my dog brought me, and I didn't want a similar Westie. I wanted a rescue because I felt there was that synergy there.
Yeah.
And it was my counsellor that told me to get a dog. And then, unfortunately, the dog behaviour said to me, the worst thing you can do if you're having a bit of a moment and you need counselling is to get a dog, because you're giving them the smell, the pheromones, all the stuff that you're going on is pretty much brought down the lead to the dog. So actually, I felt partly responsible for giving Boris some of his issues. And
Interesting.
so Boris went into dog therapy, and I went into human therapy, and now
And you both spoke about it overnight.
and now he's pretty much a civilized dog. He does still have his meet and greet issues, but don't we all? And then just as last 2 years ago, I got a little Tobster, and he'd spent 8 years of his life in a cage.
Oh.
And he's a little terrier. And but I only got Toby because I thought Boris needed a pal, and
That's
and
why
then
I ended
Toby.
up with 4 dogs at one point.
Well, then Toby is a total bully of Boris, and Boris doesn't like him. And actually, now that they put up with each other, but Toby's only
Secretly.
about this big. He's only little, and Boris is about 40 odd kilo of fluff and teeth. But yeah, they're great. And when I'm away working with this job, I've got a great young lad who stays at my house. So Boris and Toby are sat on my sofa now, probably paws up in the air while I'm at work. You know what I mean? So yeah, they have a
Living their
great
life.
life. They have a great life,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So I ask these questions to everyone. So who was your superhero or growing up, or role model, or someone that's made a difference to your life? There's probably loads.
I've got 2 that spring to mind.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, bless her, Betty Webb recently passed away. She was a Bletchley Park veteran, an amazing woman. I knew her for nearly, I think, 15 years on and off. We kept meeting at various veteran events. She was still working at 100. She was an incredible, inspiring lady. You know, when I listened to her stories, you know, she was a true trailblazer, you know, for what she did at Bletchley, but also, you know, writing her own book about. I never actually got to. We never actually got to talk about what she'd actually done there, but she gave some bits away.
Yeah,
She was she was an incredible lady. Secrets and I think it was called Secrets and Lies from the Pentagon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Down.
yeah, really incredible lady, inspiring. You know, to show that, you know, regardless of all the things that she put up with as a young lady, dealing with what she did, incredibly resilient, and just had this most positive outlook on life. So I would always run things by her, and you know, unfortunately, I never got to see her before she passed. But I was always in touch with her, and any significant sort of dates, I would send her a lovely big bouquet of red, white, and blue flowers. So she was a lovely woman. And then I suppose there's a lady called Catherine Budino who's been my mentor for nearly 20 years. I met her when I was doing a presentation for Barclays, and she came up to me and said, you know, out of all these grey suits, she was in this white dress with diamonds blinking on, and she just stood out, and she was this beacon of energy and force, and she just she was sort of wanting to help other women in the military, and she did mentoring for veterans anyway, and she ended up becoming a mentor, but also now is a dear friend, and she's currently she suffered a really bad accident 4 months ago and he's paralyzed from the neck down, and he's still incredibly upbeat and incredibly resilient, and in you know, she's written a book as well, PhD. She's just to see her in hospital every day, you know, when I get the opportunity, she still has this smile, and she's not laying there, oh, woe is me. She's like, no, I'm going to beat this, you know, and if I don't, then I'll still be able to do whatever I can, but I'll do it in a wheelchair instead, you know. And it's just that, again, it's a powerful DNA that she was, again, a trailblazer. You know, she was one of the first females to work for Murdoch, you know, on his in his management team. So she, again, gone through so much of this, dealing with men who, you know, at that time where she had a seat at the table, but she wasn't allowed to speak, where she spoke and she stood up, you know, and people listened to her. And I think that's to sum it all up at the end is, you know, it's great now that we have that seat at the table. What we now need to do is ensure our voices are heard.
Definitely. And that's one of the reasons I did the podcast, I think, to get people's incredible stories from mainly people who are so humble who've been in the military, because they don't even, some of them, realise what they've actually achieved until they start talking about it, and then they're like, oh yeah, I have done some stuff. So is there anything that we've missed off that maybe we should have talked about?
No, I think, you know, it's just been great just to speak about some of the bits. You know, it's you could carry on, couldn't you? Like say, there's an hour between us both on each deployments from Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, let alone the external influences that have come about and knocked us left, right and centre without us realising it, you know. So, you know, to me, I'd love to come back if you feel like it, you know, and talk about something else. But no, it's been great just to give you a little snippet of what I'm about, and you know, and why I still want to carry on being that sort of beacon of I don't know, of wellness and happiness, and you know, you know, just carrying on supporting women, I think. And I think we were of the generation where back in the day, somebody was always wanting to knock you down. Whereas I think we need to just get together, and we don't have to agree on everything, but let's not try and knock each other down anymore. Let's try and stand shoulder to shoulder and support each other. You know, we might not all be the same and agree the same things, but we've all got a story to tell, and let's try and be kind, I think, to each other, and support each other a bit more as women. Because there's so many men out there, regardless. And there's only so many people there wanting to knock us down and berate us, and we're not good enough. Or if we say something, it's because we're being aggressive. No, we're being assertive. If we say something, we're being moody. No, you know, it's all those words. It's not. We're just wanting to be heard. And you're mixing our communication up. We're not being aggressive. We're just telling you how we feel. And that might sound like we're being aggressive, but we're not. We're just being assertive. We're just, explaining that you can't talk to us like that anymore. You can't call us that anymore. You know, yeah. I waffled a little bit there. I went sidetracked slightly. But yeah, let's be kind to each other, I think, is the final message. And, you know, as my nan used to say, if you haven't got anything nice to say about anybody, don't say anything at all.
Exactly. They have some wise words, don't they? So finally, the podcast is called Beyond the Barracks. So what does Beyond the Barracks? I think you've already answered it, but what does Beyond the Barracks mean to you?
I think being a veteran is something I'm very incredibly proud of, and I think we need to shout out that a lot more, and support each other. And if we see each other struggling, you know, to be there, be that beacon, and shine a light on people that are doing things to help each other. You know, like this podcast, you know, that's helping others, isn't it? You know, you're doing a great thing by this podcast alone, allowing people to share their story. You know, maybe something might resonate with someone listening to me today, that, you know, you can overcome adversity, you can be at the depths and turn it around. You know, you can, and you know, you have a strong network and support from people, you'll get there. You know, and there's always going to be somebody to support you. You know, I see it on LinkedIn all the time recently, you know, once a week where somebody is just checked out and you're like, no, don't do that. Just pick up that phone. We're all here for each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, just getting people's messages out and getting so people can relate, isn't it? And that's absolutely what we're all here for, I guess, isn't it? To be there
Yeah.
to listen. It's been an absolute privilege to learn your story in full and yeah, share some of your ups and some of your downs. And thank you so much for coming on. And I'm sure we're gonna one day meet in the flesh,
I hope so.
either on a job or
Yeah.
at a social or a veterans type of meeting.
Definitely. Yeah, I need to give a big shout out to Doug for linking us both together really. Him and himself is an inspiration, and I hope we can all get together and enjoy a little glass of wine together at some point. Been an absolute privilege as well chatting to you today.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll meet up with Doug. I'm sure Doug will be on this show at some point as well. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, and yeah, I can't wait to see what you do next.
All right, thanks again. Speak soon.